Welcome. This is the Business New Zealand Roundtable. I'm Grant Walker and I'm joined by CEO Kirk Hope. Well, 2021, we've survived. We are here, but for business, it hasn't stopped and it's going to be a very interesting year. I want to start with the Climate Change Commission report for reshaping the New Zealand economy and getting to this carbon zero. What does it mean for business?
Well, I think firstly, what I'd say about the Climate Change Commission's report is it provides the pathway. What they've done is lay out budgets and provide some advice for what for different sectors and what different sectors will need to reduce their emissions by in order for New Zealand to meet its targets. The next step in this is for the government to provide their policy response to that. Now that's where really the rubber's going to hit the road. I think there's a couple of areas we're pretty interested to see what the response will be around heat and industrial processes, because that is New Zealand's manufacturing base. It'll affect dairy, for instance, in terms of the drying, and so on and so forth. So there's a range of areas which are where we need to see a bit more policy clarity. One of the things that is going to be, I think, really critical to New Zealand getting anywhere near these targets will be bipartisanship from all of the political parties. So what I think business wouldn't want to see is political parties shifting and changing policy in a way that removed certainty. So the key thing in terms of this transition is that people are going to need to invest. They're going to need to have a clear pathway to this investment. And that's probably the most critical thing.
Well, the Nats at the moment have said they're looking at it, but they don't believe in an open checkbook policy. And yet the Prime Minister seems to be in a bit of a hurry saying, right, here we go.
Yeah, well, look, I think that's something that the government will have to think about, because, as I said, the last thing that they want is to do something which, and they've also said that they don't want to do stuff which is not enduring, right? So the key thing will be how they can accommodate some of the Nats' concerns, and I think actually that's a legitimate concern. They don't want it to be an open checkbook.
Yeah, but there's a reason they don't want, the reason that Labor want it bipartisan, if you like, it's because then normally, if you go this way and the public don't like it, they vote you out. If you go together, there's no reason to do that because you're not going to lose what you had.
Yeah, well, I do think one observation that I'd make is it will be increasingly challenging to have these types of policy challenges where they're not bipartisan, right? Because they're such big, significant things, not just for the economy, but and for the business community, but for more broadly New Zealand and the communities which form New Zealand. So the reality is you might want to play politics over it, but I don't think that's going to be helpful, particularly from a business perspective.
Is the government right when they say it's going to reduce costs? I mean, the energy companies have come out this week supporting it, saying with technology it should reduce costs, but it's going to cost us 1% of GDP by 2050. So is someone going to lose?
Yeah, what I'd say about that is one of the things that the Climate Change Commission has not factored in its assessment of costs is co-benefits. So what that means is that they haven't necessarily anticipated all the changes to technology which might occur over the next 30 and 15 years respectively, right? So there is a lot of room there if you think about the changes in technologies over the last 30 years and how those have produced greater efficiencies and cost reductions across a range of different sectors. I think that's what we'd be looking at, and so they haven't factored that into their assessments, which is, that could be considerable.
So change is coming, it just matters how fast, really.
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing I'd say about it is, again, if you think about communities or businesses or sectors that might suffer significantly as a result of very rapid change, I think the government policy response definitely needs to address just transitions can't just be two words. It needs to be a clear pathway and plenty of support for local communities that might be affected. I mean, we saw what happened to rural communities after some of the reforms in the 80s, and the government often talk about this, that people were heavily disenfranchised. We don't want that going forward. They'll need to think about the support for those communities.
Well, we don't want it all to be negative, because some people are saying that while there may be costs here, there, and everywhere, there's also lots of business opportunities.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think as businesses, particularly startups and so on and so forth, there's a lot of capital, I think, available to be deployed in technologies which are emission reducing or emission free technologies, and not only that, but services that are available to help business strategize and think about how they can reduce their emissions. So that yes, there will be some costs for some sectors, and we've seen some of that, but there will also be some significant opportunities, I think, for businesses to grow and develop in that space. And that's an important space where if we can get ahead of the curve, we can also sell some of those, sell some of that thinking offshore.
All right, I want to change the subject. I want to talk about sick leave entitlements. The CTU is pushing for workers to be allowed immediate upon, you start work, and that's it, your sick leave starts, instead of that 6 months. Where are you with that?
Well, we'd prefer, obviously, that that the 6 months is retained. If you think about it, if the government, as they have indicated, they want to increase sick leave to 10 days a year by the end of this year, that's estimated by Treasury at it costing businesses around $1 billion a year. So if you think about if that happened from day one, because it's going to be probably 6 months after the end of the year when it comes in, that just brings forward a lot of expense for business at a time when I think in general, compliance costs are increasing, their costs of production are increasing. They're struggling to try and drive efficiencies in a pandemic affected world. So that's bringing forward those costs, I don't think is helpful, particularly for small to medium-sized businesses.
A lot of those costs have already been brought forward. For example, the tourism industry, where a lot of their compliance and health and safety costs have been brought forward, and yet there's no income.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's an example of exactly what I'm talking about, where an industry might be already facing other costs and increases in costs. I mean, I think we were talking about, for example, insurance and compliance certificates for tourism businesses when, as you say, a lot of their market isn't necessarily there, particularly from an international perspective right now, and may not be for the foreseeable future. Adding other costs into that at this particular time, you just got to be very careful about that. Strike a reasonable balance, otherwise, some of those businesses just won't survive.
Where are we on fair pay agreements at the moment?
I think there's quite a lot of policy work left to do on fair pay agreements, so we're anticipating that perhaps by the end of the year we might see some form of legislation. But as I say, there, from our reading of it, there is still a lot of policy work that needs to be, a lot of detail that needs to be hammered out. A couple of our team are working on that at the moment.
I want to shift to COVID, supply chain issues with getting goods in from overseas, in particular ships anchored for like 6 weeks, reports of, and some now saying, well, we're going to bypass New Zealand altogether. Is that going to come to an end, or is that going to be around for quite a while?
Well, I think there's two issues with supply chain. One is the availability of the goods that you might be bringing into the country. That's one issue, and as you see around the world, the US, UK, EU are all heavily impacted in their production, in China. Their production capacity may well be, is undoubtedly affected by that. So your ability to access those goods is going to be one part of the problem. Then the logistics of getting those goods into the country, which is the thing that you're talking about, the ships at ports and so on, is another. I think there are probably some solutions to that, and I would expect that won't last forever, but I'm less confident about our ability to access some of the products that are being manufactured offshore. How
confident are you about accessing the vaccines that we've been promised in the middle of the year?
Well, I guess everyone's got their fingers crossed on that, but the EU probably haven't done us too many favours in that regard. I guess I think we'll probably know more in about a month.
All right, finally, some good news. The UK wants to join the CPTPP, as Biden, of course, in the US has also hinted he wants to have a look at it as well. the UK have said that they see that as a way to get access to America should America come in. So should we be smiling there?
Totally. I mean, actually, you'd be, in terms of the US, I think it's, and the signals if the UK comes in, look, that's positive. Having UK in the TPP, again, is, I think, really good for New Zealand. So the signalling, there's still a lot of water to go under the bridge, but again, they'll act as an anchor to bring in the US with the size of that market, and that's really important for New Zealand. That way, we have better access. I think the US is maybe our third or fourth biggest trading partner. So to have some sort of untariffed access or reduced tariff access, or better access to that market is going to be really important going forward, and a lot of opportunities.
All right, well, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities for you and I to have a lot of discussion about a lot of things that are going to happen this year. Kirk Hope, thank you, and thank you for watching.